This is Ben Wolf of Wolf's Edge Integrators, and I'm excited to be telling the story here today of Walter's Services. And so I want to introduce three guests to tell this story, all from different angles. First of which is Scott Walters, second is Brian White, and third is Thomas Hoover. And if I could ask each of you to kind of give like a 1 minute introduction of kind of like your name, what what the business is, and what place you have in the Walter
Mhm.
Services story. So Scott, why don't you begin?
Yeah, you have the experts here, so that's good. They can make sure everything's good. So Scott Walters, Walters Services, we've been around since 1973, so 52 years, roughly. My parents started the business. I'm second generation. Never thought I'd be here. Never really wanted to be here, honestly. And so it's really a great story of how I ended up here at the company, and it's been a great journey for me. So we do site services, portable toilets, dumpsters, fencing, portable fencing for construction sites, special events, even get into industrial and different things like that. So it's really, really sexy stuff. I always tell everybody if it doesn't stink or doesn't isn't dirty, we probably don't do it. But if it does, there's a good chance we do it. So no, it's really great. We have great people here, and they're what make this business go. And I'm just blessed to be part of the team.
That is awesome. And I know one of the parts from your book. So again, we're going to put a
Yeah.
link and make sure people have access to this. But Love God, Love Business, Love People: A Family's Journey by Scott Walters. So this is your book, Scott, that just came out, and I just read this weekend. And there is one sexy thing in there. I talk about 3 Mile Island. I mean, just like that part of the story
Yeah, right.
is like pretty cool. But
Do you want to hear about that one?
well, maybe. I mean, maybe we can get into that. But it's
Yeah.
obviously it sounded like there was some
Mhm.
divine providence and some lucky decision making or whatever it was that
Yeah.
kind of enabled that opportunity,
Yes.
which really enabled to scale the whole thing. But let me ask Thomas to if you could, do your introduction.
Sure. Thomas Hoover. I am a fractional integrator in the firm of Wolf's Edge Integrators. And basically, it's a fractional executive work that in fractional COO type work that we do. And worked with Scott at Walter Services for 10 months. I think our contract was 10 months with them. And,
Mhm.
you know, his book and the title, it's absolutely appropriate. It's I've worked with dozens of companies doing what I do, and I don't know that I have found a better culture and being led in the way that it's being led than I did at Walter Services. And it was a great 10 months, and I see a really good off ramp with where they're going for the next year and what they've got going on. And I'm excited to be here to help Scott tell his story.
Mhm. He's
That's
being too
amazing.
kind, Ben. He's being too kind.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I really want to get into understanding that story. Brian.
Yeah. So I'm Brian White. I'm an expert EOS implementer. I have been an implementer for about 8 years. And I believe Scott and his team was my third client, I want to say. I think third back in the day. So we've probably been working together for about 7 years. And I've certainly learned a lot as much as my job is to teach and facilitate and coach. I would say I've probably learned a lot from Scott, not only his team and his business, but from him as just an unbelievable, amazing human. And it's been a really cool experience to not only get to know him and his story, but also watch the business go through its ups and its downs. And my gosh, what you've built and what's possible. I'm still just amazed at what's possible
Yeah.
with you guys. So it's going to be cool to see it in 5 years and 10 years, how God's blessed it and where you guys are at.
Yeah. Very true.
That's amazing. And, obviously to get like the full story going back, multiple generations, again, I
Yeah.
recommend Love God, Love Business, Love People, Scott Walters, your book. I would call it a memoir really after reading it.
Yeah.
Um, and, um, and, I guess I want to start with you. you don't have to go necessarily again. I think maybe go to the book for like all the details,
Sure.
but like maybe getting to a little bit more recent history that, and kind of in the months or a couple of years leading up to before making this move on bringing in, Thomas as as a very experienced integrator or COO is tell us like what was going on before, what was working, what was not working. And I mean, I don't know if you want to go back to 7 years when you started working on EOS,
Yeah.
but kind of tell me a little about like set the stage for for what was going on here with with Thomas, with the integrator role in the business in general, with you as a leader. Set the stage
Mhm.
for us.
Well, these guys can both tell you, I mean, the business had grown. And so it was to the point where it was beyond my ability to continue to lead on my own anymore. So we're an EOS company, like Brian mentioned. We've been with EOS for quite a while and really just love the system, the structure, everything about it. We're 100% in. So I was filling both the visionary and integrator roles since the beginning. And it was just not functioning well anymore. I don't know. You could ask Brian his opinion of whether or not it really totally functioned anyway, because I was trying to do both. And I think that's very difficult to do well. But it was obvious that the business had grown to the point where it was not workable anymore. And if I wanted the business to continue to grow and the people here to thrive, then I needed to bring in an integrator and help us do the things that's very possible here, as these guys have already mentioned, for this business. So it really was back in the day, Ben, before I ever got into EOS, I had to realize that I was a roadblock. I was a bottleneck in the business. Everything was going through me, typical, leader of a small business. And I had to realize that that had to stop. And it felt the same way to me again. Although we had a structure, although other people were leading and doing their things, I had to step out of the way more and allow more people to have input and to lead this organization. Honestly, much better than I can. I will do my part and I look forward to doing my part. But I know as a team, uh, the finished product for everybody, our people here and our customers will be much better.
What was at that point when you're saying that it stopped working as well with you and also the both the visionary and the integrator role? What about that was not working? You talked about your size. What was
Mhm.
the size then? What was the complexity?
Mhm.
Like in what way was that not working for you or
Well,
for the team?
yeah, I think a lot of it is that it just grew more complex because now we have 5 locations over the Mid-Atlantic region. So I was up at 3 o'clock this morning visiting the guys down at DC in that area. And then we out in Philly, we're in York, Lancaster, Harrisburg. And so when you start doing that across a little bit bigger geographic area, right? I can't touch those people. I can't talk to those people all the time. I lose control of those things that when everybody's here close. And then, just many more customers, many more vehicles out in the road, different departments and more people in each department. The complexity has just arisen to the point that I can't, I can't do that on my own well. And it's also beyond my training. I keep learning, I keep growing, and I love that. Like I love that I have to, but I want to do the best for this team. I want this team to accomplish the very best things they can. And so I need to realize that, hey, there are other ways to do this better, Ben. I hope that answered your question. It was really just a realization of this business, thankfully, has grown to the point that we need more help.
Can I
And with
can I
yeah, go
jump
ahead,
in real
Brian.
quick, Ben? I think what's really interesting about Scott is he is, I mean, visionaries come in all different shapes and sizes, but Scott really was blessed in that he had the ability to really be an integrator at a certain capacity. Like some visionaries have zero capacity in that at all, right? I mean, just none. And they don't even realize it. I think Scott both had the ability to, I don't want to say fake it till you made it,
Right.
because it really was learned skills, but you always knew at your heart it wasn't where you were thriving and what you were the best at. But I think you were certainly able to, um, because of your love for people, I think you were really, and your willingness to grow and learn, like you just said, like you had an ability to handle a certain amount of that integrator role, right? And
Right.
keep things on track and on schedule. But not every visionary is like that. But
Right.
there's a blessing and a curse there,
Yeah.
right? So the ones that have zero ability immediately know that they are absolutely holding the business back. You almost could get it to a level, and my guess is you got it to a level where maybe you're even a little in too deep,
Yeah, definitely.
right? Because
Definitely.
you had those skills.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And with you being in too deep and maybe holding the business back because of your own maybe limitations in the integrator role as the kind of leader manager that your people needed you to be or they needed in that role. But what, the other interesting thing that I always like to hone in on is that that whole job of integrator is probably also holding you back from being your own highest and best use. Not just holding the business back by a lack of maybe the right integrator, but also what was that keeping you from, and what was the business losing out by it not having you in your own highest and best use? What was your highest and best use that you weren't fully utilizing?
Yes. I mean, that is definitely the case. I would say that in the last couple of years, I have really had to just shelve my visionary self and just be the integrator, you know? So I really had to just pay attention to the nuts and bolts of the business and what was happening in an integrator type role. And, for me, that's not who I am. And I love to go out and make, the business just thrive and move forward in the culture and talking to people and, finding places to acquire and doing all that. That is me. That is me. And so honestly, I've almost felt like I lost a little part of me in some ways as the business kept growing.
Mhm.
And I
Mm,
had to learn more and more how to do this and give my time and focus to that. So I there are lots of ways the business suffered because I didn't do this earlier and I didn't keep doing the things that I'm naturally gifted at to really help move the business forward, Ben. And so
right.
there's no doubt that it's had detrimental effects. I would say that part of this story is this whole merger with my brother's company. So my parents started this business out as a septic service, and then my dad actually only started the portable toilet business out. He bought, I think, 10 or 12, and he did that just as an advertising tool for his septic service. And he never thought the business would grow. And I was in seminary, and he asked me, it started to grow, and he said, "Can you just come here and help me for a year or two?" And I said, "Sure, I'll help you." And so I came back to the business, never thinking I would ever be here. And it started to grow like crazy. And I remember telling him, "Dad, this business is going to be way bigger than your septic business." And he laughed at me. He and my brother both just laughed at me and said, "This will never happen. You don't know what you're talking about." And sure enough, it's way, way more now. But so my brother and I, a little while ago, decided, hey, this makes sense. Let's put these businesses back together. We both own the separate entities now, and let's put them back together. And we had scaled the portable toilet business out over geographic area. We could scale that septic business out over that pretty easily. We already have the framework in there. And so, let's go do that. And so that's what we started. And as we got into that, the business became even more complex then. That just
Mhm.
added more complexity to it. And so as he and I talked, we realized that we needed to add an integrator. And that's what got us to the point of coming in and finding you guys and Tom to
Mhm.
come into the business. And
Did you try anything else?
Tom's first day was epic. So, I mean, I'm sure in Wolf's Edge, Tom's first day will live forever in infamy.
No.
I have heard about that quite a bit, and well, I actually wanted to go to Brian, but before I do that,
Mhm.
since you brought up talking about looking for that integrator, and
Yeah.
with that even greater complexity, did you try other things? Did you try like hiring full time or consultants or other options? Like, was there anything else that you tried before talking to a fractional integrator firm like Wolf's Edge or something else?
Well, we looked inside the organization first to see if we had
Hmm.
anyone that could do it. So we didn't have anyone that we felt at this level of complexity that we could just get into the job. That would have been ideal. And we looked around a little bit. Certainly would have loved to have found somebody, and we didn't. And honestly, I really wanted someone that understood what that role meant and had done it professionally and really could start it off right so that we could continue well. And that's what made me start to look for a fractional integrator. I did talk to Brian about that. And, I did go out and search. I mean, I interviewed a lot of firms that do this, I really felt very comfortable with you guys, and really felt super comfortable with Tom. And so it was quite a process, and I really gave it a lot of effort because I wanted to do it well, and I knew that this was a really important decision for us going forward. Again, I knew this was setting the table for what this would look like for the future and how a full-time integrator would come in sometime for us. And so I wanted to do it well.
Right. It makes sense. And I want to get like before we get to the Thomas part of the story, I want to hear from Brian now. Like, okay, you've been working with Scott and Walter Services for the last 7 or so years. Like, tell me your version of this story. Like, from your perspective in the session room, and in whatever conversations you guys have been having. Um, what's the journey of Scott, especially as it relates to this integrator role, or the complexity and maybe not getting the full Scott that they deserved, in from your point of view.
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember 7 years ago, the building of the leadership team, right, was a huge step just for you to think about, like, okay, what is it that my role is as I start to, as we say in the US, let go of the vine and start to give actual ownership and authority and responsibility to these individuals. What does that look like? And if I recall, maybe it was a little bit of that, oh wow, we can do this. Here, everybody, take all this stuff. And then I think he was like, oh shoot, wait a minute, maybe I handed off a little too much too quickly to the team. If I'm thinking correct, the 7 years is a long time. But no, I think it was a journey, right? I mean, all of this is really a visionary's journey of what it looks like to truly build the right people around you and give them the authority, which also means, right, they have to deal with the consequences of their own decisions, but then invest in them. And so I would say in my mind, that was really the first part of your story, Scott, was you investing in a team and seeing the growth in that team. Um, and I think you did it well, and the business, prospered and grew to the point where, I don't know if did the merger come about from boredom? Because we weren't working together, I think, in the beginning. Like,
Yeah.
you had graduated, you guys you're killing it. Sometimes visionaries get bored and do crazy things.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was the precipitation for, like, oh, maybe we should
Yeah.
merge. This sounds like a great idea.
I don't know if it was boredom. I really think it was, I think it was a good idea. We should have done it differently. And I've learned a lot about that. I could have done much better at that. And I think set us up for more success. I think the end result where we are now, where we've dissolved the merger, is actually a good place for both companies. And I think everybody's good. But Brian's right. We set up the leadership team, and we did have an integrator for just a little bit, one of the guys on our staff, and I didn't understand what that meant, and neither did he. And so it really didn't end up being a true integrator. He was more functioning as my assistant, kind of,
Chief,
you
chief of
know.
staff, if
Yeah,
anything, yeah.
and not for any fault of his own. It was more of mine, right? I didn't understand what it truly meant, and I didn't understand how that looked. And Adam wasn't ready for that at that time in his career either. And so we I took that position back, and then we've learned how to do it better through the years. But I think that's one reason why I really wanted to make sure we did it differently this time and try to learn from lessons. I can be pretty bullheaded. I'm Pennsylvania Dutch. So, we can not learn from our mistakes and just keep hammering away, right? But I tried to learn, and I tried to say, okay, so how can we do this differently? And it seemed like that was a good avenue to go. I don't think we talked about it a lot, bringing in a fractional integrator, but we did talk about it just briefly in your room, as far as
Yeah, yeah.
you
So
encouraged me.
yeah. So then when we kind of re-engaged, as you were thinking about this merger and what that would look like, and again, as you said, things were getting more complex. And I also think we talked about maybe some of the original passion for some of the EOS tools had gone to checking some of the boxes instead of,
Yep.
like, really, like, living it out. And in those conversations, as certainly as you were being open and honest and transparent about what you were seeing and feeling in the company, to me, the gaping hole was this person that would be, as we call the rocket fuel, right? Like we only had half of the engine firing here. And so you had the ideas and the desire to grow and scale this thing to an amazing size. I mean, you have a vision, and you just need that partner that's going to come alongside of you and help you accomplish that vision. And so, yeah, fractional integrators have been a huge part of, I think, helping a lot of my clients figure out. Like, I remember for you, Scott, the conversation was even, hey, this might be really good just for you to get a vision yourself of what an actual integrator looks like, so that when you do go to the full-time, employee, like you got in your mind a better understanding of the shape of it. Like, let's just outline this thing, and then it'll give you that information that you need to actually select the right person.
Yeah, I would agree. Ben, basically what Brian's saying, I'll interpret this in real plain language. Tom inherited a problem child.
I don't
I
know
don't
if
know if I
that's
would have
what you're
said that.
saying. Yes. And having read your book, I know when you say plain, I know that has maybe is a term of art in some instances as well. It's
Yeah.
but the uh, well, actually, one more question for Scott then on this. So tell me, when, at the point before, when you were meeting all of these fractional integrators and firms that do that, and you met with us, what was at that point the size and scale and scope of the organization at that point?
Well, it was like we were talking about. So it was we were in those locations at that
It was
time.
5 territories, you said,
Yeah,
right?
5 territories across, 4 or 5 states there. And we were running a little bit above 20 million, 20, 21 million, 120 employees. And that was with both the companies combined. So that
Right.
was
I think
when
it
we
was
were
about
talking.
100 without the septic, right?
Yes, it was 100, and we were running around, 16 million, something like that, roughly, um, alone. And so,
Right.
yeah, that's where we were, from a number standpoint. And so we were starting to get more and more complex. And so we just needed help. And
Yeah.
it was great conversations. And I will say that the way you conduct your interview process, as far as me being very able to ask any questions and you guys answering anything and providing information. You really have a great process, and very open and honest. And I felt very comfortable. I immediately knew that you were professionals, you knew what you were doing, and that, that I felt very comfortable with y'all. And again, there were others that were very good. I mean, I went out on LinkedIn, and anybody that had an integrator, I think anywhere associated with their name, I think I might have talked to them.
Well, I really appreciate hearing that, and actually I forgot to bring a fine point back on this earlier, but I think it's really key to reemphasize, in terms of, like, because as fractional integrators or as integrators of any kind, our our goal really is to unleash you as the visionary. So I
Mhm.
think that the greatest impact on the business, yes, there's greater efficiency. Yes, there's elevating of leadership teams. Yes, there's getting right people in the right seats. And yes, there's moving across the finish line of many rocks and important initiatives. But also, like, I think some of the biggest ROI, some of the biggest juice is going to, usually comes from the stuff that the Scott or the visionary of the business is able to do. And in your instance, what I heard was that's geographic expansion, that is culture building, like people oriented stuff. That's like, it's in the humans, not just getting the business done.
Yeah.
And stuff that's on acquisitions, the stuff that's on growth, whether growth of the one business, growth and growth through acquisition, and stuff that related to people. Those are three topics I heard that is going to be the biggest leverage for the people and for the business itself, is having you able to focus much more time, energy, and bandwidth, mental and emotional, on that stuff.
Ben, this business is about seeing people flourish. That's my passion, right? I want to see people here at Walters flourish, and not for selfish reasons. Like, I want them then to take that flourishing out and make our customers' lives better, make the communities that we function in better. And honestly, part of the reason that I love to scale the business out is because I think that our culture is awesome, and I love to bring more people into that culture so that they can be blessed and so that they can experience the positive nature of it and they can flourish. And so that is part of what makes me want to expand the business, offer opportunities to our people so they can go do more and again flourish, and also so that we can bring more people into that environment so that there can be more of that, right? That's my gift, and that's my way of blessing the world. Everybody's got their own, right? We all have
Mhm.
the ways that we can function in this world and bring blessing to this world. That's one of the main ways that I can do that, that I've recognized in myself. And so I want to do that with the most impact that I can possibly have.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
beautiful. I mean, again, it goes to the title of the book again: love God, love business, love people, right? Yeah, Brian, go ahead.
yeah. I just thought occurred to me. Do you think your leadership team wanted an integrator? Like when we got back together, you were in the middle of the merger. Did they want that, or were they afraid that it was going to disconnect them from you somehow?
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a yes and no to that, right? So I think that no, they didn't want an integrator because there's fear of change, and also everyone's comfortable with Scott and know what to expect from me, and we have good relationships and long-standing relationships in most places. So I think the yes part would be that everybody would tell you very quickly that they think another integrator could do a much better job of making life good at Walters, right? So I think that's why I'd say a yes and no. But I think that probably if they just had to give you one answer, most would be no, because they would want me to stay there because they felt comfortable with that, and they would be want to continue. The ship wasn't sinking and it was going okay, and we were growing, and so
Mhm.
why rock the boat?
Yeah, I just think that's an interesting dynamic that I think a lot of visionaries struggle with. Is what is going to happen with the team, especially if they are afraid of this new.
Yeah,
If they've never had an integrator. Now, if you look at the accountability chart, there's this layer now almost
yeah,
that's in between, and I feel like, and maybe you could tell, like afterwards, right? So after Tom came on board,
yeah.
were those fears realized? Did they, were they unfounded? Because I think a lot of visionaries would benefit from hearing of
Mhm.
of the team dynamic, what they're thinking before and after.
Good question. And Tom can probably jump in here too. But I think that of course it's getting to know someone, but I think Tom did really a great job of allaying those fears. I know everybody felt very comfortable with him, especially over time. And I think that he took away that worry that, and also just that I'm just going to leave, or what's going to happen? Am I going to die? I'm still here and I'm still functioning and I'm still a really integral part of what's happening. It's just that you have somebody much better at organizing this business. So thank God that he's here. So I think that him being here again was part of kind of my terrible plan. Was that I didn't plan that well, but I mean I did think about the fact that he could help set the stage for what an integrator looks like at Walters. And I would say part of my answer to that question, that you guys kind of the bigger question here, is when I went over to you, Brian, at EOS, I was so frustrated with myself, so frustrated with the potential I saw in the business, but the results I was seeing from the business and in our people, that I was willing to do anything that wasn't illegal or immoral to make this business better. And I still feel that way. And that's why, even though there's fear of change and what's going to happen and how's the team going to react to this, as far as I know, hiring Tom wasn't illegal or immoral. So, we went with it. I don't know. Tom can answer that one too. Maybe he can.
Well, Thomas, let me get to you from your story, and I want to hear about your perspective also on that team dynamic point that Brian was bringing up, and I want to hear your perspective on that. But I just want to go back a tiny bit further in time. Tell us what was your impression of Scott and the team and things, when you first met Scott and first came in contact or learned about Walter Services, and like what were you thinking? What did you see as being what's working again, what's not working? Like, what were you seeing at the beginning when you first came in contact?
Well, I mean, you just tell from the answers that Scott's already given. If you've noticed, every time he answers a question, it's all about, his team and his customers. It's always about the people. He always goes back to it. And when you talk to Scott, like I said, every answer, you're not going to talk to him more than a couple of minutes before he starts referring to what's best for the people that work at Walters, what's best for our clientele. It always goes back to that. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen anybody with a motto that they write on the side of their trucks: "We love people." That's the company motto. I was like, okay, it's hard for me to put a business model behind this, as a COO, but this is exactly how he operates. So whenever you go into it, as soon as you start talking to him, this is exactly what starts coming out. Is that he's frustrated, and why is he frustrated? It's not because the company's not growing; it's because he feels like he's holding his people back. Okay, well then we can certainly do things about that. We can certainly change the dynamics of the leadership team, change the structure of how we do some of our processes and procedures to elevate people and give them their chance to grow themselves and become their best, right? And that's what I found. What I stepped in and what I found was there was a lot of people who actually had more room to grow, and they were absolutely operating at the highest level they probably ever operated at, and yet they still had more room to grow. They just didn't know how to get there because they've never seen it before. And so, that was one of the true blessings, was getting to take the leadership team and some other people in the company and actually show them this is what it can look like. And only thing we had to do was just change our way of thinking about things. And it was pretty phenomenal to see, especially with, some of the things that he had going on at the time. It was, the culture made all the difference. The reason why it turned around so quickly is because of him and how he led his people.
Well,
But
Thomas,
that's what I saw when I first started too. I saw that, and so that's where it ended. Yeah.
I still want to hear about this first day. I don't know if I ever heard that story.
Oh, really? Oh, boy.
Yeah,
We'll
Thomas,
let Ben get us there. I'm sure he will.
Yeah, well, Thomas, you already talked about the beginning of the engagement. So, what happened on the first day of Walter Services?
So, Ben, I know that you know this, and obviously Scott knows it now, but I typically like to start my engagements in person. I want to go in. I want to meet the owner face to face. I want to meet the leadership team face to face. I want to get a tour of the company, so I have a really good idea of exactly what I'm talking about and who I'm talking to. And showed up in Pennsylvania and went to the office that morning, and was interviewing members of the leadership team. And before I got to Scott's brother, who was the owner of the septic company that had merged with him, before I even got to them, they'd had a discussion that morning, and everything came to a head. And they decided today was the day to dissolve the merger. I never even got a chance to talk to him and to see if that was something that we could work through. They had made that decision, and so from that point on, from day one, about 3 to 4 hours into the day, we were in fire management, right? We were, hey, and of course, to Scott's credit, like I said, the first thing he said, how do we protect the people? How do we, there are going to be some employees that go to this company and some employees that go to that company and this and that. And we want to make it to where they have a place to be. And he immediately got concerned about them. And of course, he was concerned about the customers and the clients. We don't want any service to fall through the cracks. There's going to be a lot of activity of equipment and locations and people. And how do we take care of our clients so that they don't know that any of this is happening? And the other thing, and this goes back to, where does all this come from? Scott's family is just amazing. I mean, how do you go through something that comes to a head and says, we just don't need to work together anymore, and you still meet together for Sunday dinner, and they're still a family? And to my knowledge, that's the way it always worked. And I don't know if that was Scott or his brother. It may have been his mom and dad saying that, yeah, you guys are coming and sitting for dinner, whether you like it or not. But and if you hear them talk, I mean, there's never a cross word. There's never a sore word about any of it, about anybody. And that goes back to that culture part. But that was the day. The very first day was, hey, what we signed up for, that's not what's going to happen. We're going to demerge now. So we kind of went into chaos management on about 3 hours into the engagement. Yeah.
Well, Ben, this is where I have a little bit of problem with your onboarding process. So, like, you guys didn't tell me that when Tom goes to a company, this is typical. Like that kind of thing just happens.
This is
No,
typical.
I'm just
Yeah,
joking.
all of our clients like demerge with their former
No.
Yeah, right.
manager
Immediately, first
Yeah.
day
Oh, it's
out.
going to be
on
taken
the
out of
first day.
context, Ben. Be careful.
Strike that part. Strike that part. Hey, I do have. I mean, it really. I can be nothing but impressed, right? Because, um, that's crazy. That was not what we hired Tom for. We didn't, like he said, this was the project. This was what we were
Right.
aiming for.
Integration of the companies was a big part of what we
Yeah.
thought we were going to be focused on.
Right. And then all of a sudden, like within a few hours, it's not. And not only that, but then you got a mess, right? You've got a mess. It was a mess because, like, my brother was heading operations, which is most of the company, right?
Mhm.
Operational staff at all these places. And all of a sudden, we don't have an operational leader. Well, really? I mean, and then that just cascades down through the organization, all kinds of things. And so, like I said, I can only say that Tom was awesome because right away he started jumping in and okay, so he jumped into integrator mode, right? Like, how are we going to organize this crazy mess that's going on right now? And what are we going to do? Here's the steps. We're going to work through this process. And these are the people that we need to talk to. And these are the key people that we need to be having face-to-face conversations with. And very awesome to just help organize it. And not only that, but that way there were more of us to do it too, right? I mean, like he could talk to some people, I could talk to some people, and together we had the bandwidth to make it all happen. And so, I mean, yeah, kudos to you, Tom.
Thank you.
That's beautiful. Yeah, well, maybe I'll get a little bit more of the story now from Tom. Is Thomas, you spoke for a minute ago on uh on the ways that people were again in the running the largest departments of the largest company that they ever had before that, right? Because it
Mhm.
had evolved up to that point, and they had
Right.
evolved into those roles. And what were like when you came in there, the early stages of the relationship, what were some of the big focuses? What were some of the big things that were going on, maybe that are working or not working? What were some of the big, I guess, projects or initiatives, rocks, and how did you handle them? What did you do?
Well, it's what Scott had already alluded to. You grow from one territory to 5 territories, and we're no longer talking. It's not 5 times more logistics. It's actually probably closer to 25 times more logistics, right? And when you grow up and for 35 or 40 of the years, you're at one territory, it's very easy to track inventory because everything, flows out of 1 yard.
Yeah.
But now we got things flowing out of 5 yards, and not just flowing back and forth out of 5 yards. They're flowing to each other too. They're exchanging inventory. We're exchanging trucks. We're sharing labor. We're sharing, different things. It becomes infinitely more complicated that way. And the fact that they were able to get to where they were with the staff that they had, and I tell people this all the time, man, it's to be commended. Most businesses can't get to this stage with the people that they start with. And this is exactly what Scott was able to do. And you have people sitting in chairs where they're helping, lead these departments, and they've never done it either. And so it's actually pretty impressive. Like I said, most companies can't get to this stage without more help, and they were able to do it. And I'll fall back on the culture again. The people, as talented as they are, I feel like there's a lot of people that are in his company that are outperforming their talent. And this is not a knock on them. It's because of their culture. And it's because they want to and they care to. They care about Scott. They care about the company. They care about each other. And so they're definitely going above and beyond their talent level, not necessarily forever talent level. They were very teachable. And including Scott. I mean, it was one of those things. One of the things I first leapt on was the leadership team. I wanted to make sure that they knew exactly what needed to be done for them to succeed in the position that not only the position they were in, but the position the company was in at the moment. What do we need to do? And as Scott alluded to, who do we need to talk to first? How do we make sure that, because in the absence of information, people just make up their own stories, right? That's the way it works. We wanted to get on that quick because we wanted to make sure everybody knew that the company was stable, and it was. There's no falsehoods being presented here.
Right.
It was, and that they were stable. They had a place. None of that was going to change, but there's the way that we operated was going to have to change a little bit because of the demerger. And to their benefit, every single person on the team totally bought in and did the things that we said, these are the things that we need to do. And then as other things came up, they all talked to each other. We communicated. We kept the communication lines open. And we said, hey, I found this, and check this in your department because this could be going on there also. And all those different things started happening in rapid action, right? Because that's the way that these types of things work. But because his team was so bought in and so high on the cultural level, it worked. It worked better than it should have. Let me just say it from experience.
Yeah,
right.
We should have had a lot more problems, and we did not. And
you spoke.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You spoke, Thomas, on how you started a little bit talking about it with showing people clarity of what the business needs. But can you talk a little bit more about elevating that leadership team, right? Because you talked about how even though they had grown so much and were already even maybe so much more capable than necessarily they should have been on paper,
Right.
given the scale that the company had come from, but tell us more about what did you do with these members of the leadership team to help them grow into closer to what I like to call a leadership team of owners, people who truly own their functions of the business, don't need to be managed and ran and helicopter managed, right? So talk more about kind of like the work that you did and the growth that those people had in as being leaders and managers.
Sure. So, this company runs on EOS, and Brian had done a really good job of already teaching them some of these LMA, the leadership, lead, manage, and accountability tools and things like that. So whenever I was able to bring those back up, this is how you lead people. This is how you manage people. This is how you hold people accountable. They already had the foundational knowledge because they'd already been taught this in their sessions with Brian. And so by being able to fall back on that, it was very, very easy for me, to say, hey, remember what we're doing here. Are you taking your clarity breaks? A lot of people think that that's just for the visionary. Okay. It's very important for the visionary, but I think it's important for all the leaders to take some sort of clarity break to where they can actually sit back and think about what their department needs to look like. Sit back and think about, your different people in your department that you're leading. What do they need? What do they need from you? What do they need from themselves? And, how do we make sure that they get that? Are you having your one-on-ones? Are you having the meeting pulse that you should have with your department and with your staff? And do we have measurables that we can hold people accountable to? People respect what you inspect, right? I mean, that's the term. So we're going to inspect these numbers and we want them to respect them. These are their measurables. We want to hold them accountable to it and just give them ownership of those things. And so over time, you keep pressing that button where people turn from employees to managers because you keep pushing the button, and if they have the talent, they'll take it and they'll start running with it. And then you change them from managers to leaders, right? Now, you're a good manager. Can you lead people? And how are we thinking about it? How are we taking care of our people? Are we thinking ahead? What do they need before they even get there so that we can remove obstacles before they even get there? And so whenever you start talking to people, that's exactly the type of, we just fall back on some of those EOS tools. And like I said, because they already kind of had that desire to have the ownership mentality because the culture was so good. It was just a matter of showing them these little things. Hey, remember that tool that Brian taught you? This is how we use it. When you have that desire in you to have that mentality, this is how you take that ownership mentality and present it to your team.
Ben,
And
if I could jump
Thomas,
in too. Can I jump
yeah,
in real quick?
yeah, yeah.
Tom just kept saying this over and over again. I just want to reiterate this. And Tom, you can jump in here too. But Brian has done such a great job teaching us EOS.
Mhm.
And when you go and to the sessions with him, and also he'll spend time with you anytime you need. I mean, Tom, you said this to me a number of times. That guy's awesome at what he does. I mean, he's
Yeah.
like you get around a lot of professional EOS implementers, and I mean, Brian, I got it. I always I'm a fan. I think Brian's the best, and you said that a lot. Like this
Uh-huh.
guy's awesome.
Yeah, I'll give Brian his plug. He's an elite level implementer. That is really good. And I'm not knocking any other implementers, obviously, uh, but Brian's good. And yeah, and a lot of people call it luck for you, Scott. I just don't believe in luck.
Yeah,
You're a blessed man. If the people that you surrounded yourself with, it's pretty
yeah.
impressive. It really is.
You guys are being too nice. Because when I taught LMA, I told you it stands for leave me alone.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
I heard that at the great boss I was at with you.
Great boss.
So the oh man, and Brian, we'll make sure if you get this recording, so you could turn this into a testimonial.
It's the truth.
The
Yeah, no kidding.
the Actually, I did want to ask Thomas again about something that Brian had said earlier, asked about earlier, which is, Thomas, and then I want to get to Scott's part of the story, like the
Oh, good.
post, engagement beginning story. But Thomas, when you came in there, what would you say about Brian's question from earlier about, yeah, there is that fear that, oh no, I'm going to lose access to Scott. I'm going to be reporting to Thomas now as the integrator and not to Scott, that it's always been for decades.
Mhm.
So, or his parents before that. So what did you see? What happened? What approach did you take, like to come in as the integrator? And this is something I think that all integrators can learn from as well, is coming into this role to make sure that it's doing something for the team, not to the team, and
Mhm.
and that uh it's either mitigate or get around. Like, how did you approach that fear about, hey, are we losing Scott? We're not going to have that direct relationship with him anymore.
Yeah, but you mentioned it, and that's exactly my approach. Is this is for you and not to you. We're doing this for you, and I always tell people also, this is an investment that Scott is making for you. This is a something that it's just like EOS. He's making this investment, not for the company, it's for the team, and because the team, the company will grow because the team will grow. And I tell people all the time, that bigger isn't better, better is better.
Mhm.
So, he's investing in our betterment. And whenever we get better, the business just naturally grows whenever we do that. But going back to your question, that's exactly what I do. I want to be here for you. I'm not here to change you. What I'm here to do is to
Or be
remove
a
roadblocks.
policeman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to remove obstacles. I want to remove roadblocks. I want to remove the things that are keeping you from being able to do your job at a higher level. And I've yet to meet anybody on a leadership team that doesn't say, man, if this wasn't going on, man, we could really accomplish so much more. There's always something from every leadership team member. And there's always an obstacle that's just been there. And I guess I'm just going to have to live with it. It'll always be this way. And when you start doing those things and removing those obstacles, that people start to buy in, and you give it to them up front. And there are some people that are really skeptical. They think I'm there to replace them or to get rid of everybody. And that has never been the case. I've never had a visionary or a business owner tell me, hey, I want you to come in and let's start cleaning house. I've never had anybody tell me that.
Well, Ben,
Because
that's his
actually my
next
approach to
assignment. So
most business owners, I tell them, I said, let me evaluate your leadership team, because what I have actually found is I've yet to find a leadership team that did not have room to grow. They just didn't see the other side, like we talked about before, a different perspective. And so I tell the team members that I said, by the time that we finish working together, you'll be where you need to be to do the job, or you'll realize that you don't want it. I mean, that's typically the way that it works. People will scale up, and they have room for it. And if they don't want to, then they end up making that decision. But quite honestly, the vast majority of the time, the people scale up. They just do. They usually have a little bit more. They have more room to grow, and they take that opportunity and they do it. And to be fair, if you're on a leadership team and you don't want to grow and you don't want to be better, you probably shouldn't be on the leadership team.
Right.
And the vast majority of them do, and they take that opportunity and they run with it. And so
Scott,
that whenever I talk to them, that's exactly what I present to them. I said, I want to help you be better at what you do and get you in that, in your highest and best use also. And so what do we need to do to get there? And we just start brainstorming and we talk about it. I say, so if we can do this, this, and this, you think you can, this broad vision that Scott has, this big, hairy, audacious goal that he has, that you guys have all mapped out for the next 10 years. If we start doing this today, that's going to get it to where you can function and do what you need to do to get us to that goal. And they say, yes. I said, all right, let's start. And then you just start helping them do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think what he just said is really, really, I know you want to go to Scott, but what he just said is really important. I don't even know if he realizes the psychology of what a great integrator does. Sometimes the vision from a visionary can be so, it can cause so much internal pressure or anxiety, or like there's a weight to that vision. And the visionary, just the way they're wired, doesn't even realize or even notice that it's causing this right on the team.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
the team wants to perform and they want to get there. And it's not that they're against it. I mean, every once in a while there are some. In Scott's case, it certainly wasn't the case. But people are not afraid of change. They're afraid of the loss that comes with change. So they want the vision. They're afraid of what are they going to lose that's going to get them there. And what you did, Tom, was break it down into a manageable, bite-sized set of steps. You're almost helping them mentally think through the realization of, if we can just do this, then we're on our way to this larger, grander thing. And it may seem simple, but that is the job of an integrator, is to literally break down the vision into manageable, not just manageable from a physical skill level capacity, but sometimes from a mental capacity for the leadership team, right? So they can actually wrap their heads around it and perform.
It's a good point, Brian, because I do remember the first quarterly that we had with you. And immediately after that, my first session with one of the members of Scott's leadership team. And that was exactly it. It's like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And we broke down the milestones for the rocks and the things that she had. And immediately she's like, oh. And then once we had that, it's totally different conversations from that point forward. And like you said, it had nothing to do with ability or anything else. It was just the pressure of that big vision. And, how do you break that down? And exactly, you nailed it right to the point, is that once we broke that down into the bite-sized pieces, immediate relief. I mean, the difference on the face and the call and everything changed once we did about 5 minutes worth of work. I mean, it was, it was simple. It's not always easy, but it was simple.
Having a full-time, having a person who is their sole job is dedicated to helping that leadership team overcome the mental ruts that they can get themselves in. It can be an unbelievably powerful, right? We all have limiting beliefs. And so it's just a powerful example, I think, of what an integrator who's actually harmoniously orchestrating the moving parts. Some of that harmonious orchestration's all between the ears.
Yeah, for sure, because not everybody has the power of the vision behind it like the visionary does, for sure. And it's hard to, but when they start grasping it, it was never the same after that. It was always a much more positive experience for this leadership team member, which I was very grateful for.
That's amazing. Well, yeah, and I want to get to Scott now. In like when you did decide to bring in Thomas and Wolf's Edge Integrators, what's your perspective? Like, what happened? What did he do? What was accomplished? How did it happen? Like, what's your perspective on what happened bringing in this integrator?
Yeah, I mean, from a numbers perspective, I don't think it was a fair situation. So we stayed fairly static from a numbers perspective, and I think that was a huge win, honestly, because where we were, there was the potential for things to really get out of control. And
Mhm.
so I think that's where the big win was. That really Tom helped to bring continuity to the team. He helped to give direction and very systematic ways to deal with the situation that was again, problematic for everybody. Help to shore up operations and got an operational leader that was, not very seasoned in that. Tom saw the good in him and kept building him up and coaching him and helping him and working through decisions that he was encountering. Not he had never been at that leadership level before. And
Mhm.
so Tom got him through that process. Tom helped us go out and find a real seasoned operations leader, and he's just crushing it now, and helped us, prepare the organization to go forward. So just like he said, he sees the great things ahead, and they're actually just starting to happen. Like that's what Tom said. As soon as I leave, they're going to start to happen. It's not fair, and and I agree with that. It's not fair, but it really is. So we it wasn't a good situation we were in, and the organization naturally suffered. And I think the suffering was much less with Tom here, and he helped bring us so that we were starting to go up when our engagement ended because we had found a full-time integrator. So the organization now has our feet back under us, and we're starting to really go forward like we were before all this merger happened. And so I, I think that's honestly, I know that's a huge win because it could have been really bad, Ben. It could have been really bad. And I'm an optimistic person. Like these guys probably never hear me say anything negative. Like I don't even think negative, but it
Right.
could have been bad. And it got rough. I mean, there were we had to work hard, and we had to go at it hard to keep things together. So as far as helping with the leadership team, another voice to the leadership team was really, really important during a traumatic time to have as many voices saying, okay, so it's okay. This is how we can go forward. This is the plan. We would get together and talk about things. And certainly I mean, Tom walked in the door, right? He didn't know anything about this industry. So I would bring him up to speed on this is what typically happens. This is how this works. This is how that works. And Tom would immediately begin to understand and put pieces together. And then he'd go out and talk to people about what we need to do. Um, you know, he just really helped people make it happen. Just his systematic way of working through things in each department in those meetings that he'd have weekly with each of the department heads. Okay, so what's your piece in this puzzle, and how are we going to go forward here? And yeah, I mean, just wonderful. I think it was just great. He did a fantastic job.
One of the things I know, I think Thomas told me was that, is that, as we go into 2026, that there's, I guess tremendous geographical expansion. Am I right? That is in the offing now. And what, I guess what role did the work that, with the operations leader or with the leadership team or with any of those other things that you talked about, what was the relevance or importance of the work that Thomas did during those 10 months to the expansion that's now, been teed up? Would that expansion have been able to happen equally as well, or happened at all had it not been for that? Or like, how would you describe that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I can't tell you if it would not happen at all because it could have if Tom wouldn't have been, so that's a possibility, right? That's what I've been alluding to. But no, his work helped to organize the chaos so that we can came out of the bad situation, and so that we are um, everybody understands where they need to be and what they need to do looking forward. What does that look like going forward? Not just what does it look like where we are. So Tom helped
Mhm.
everyone to see into the future and say, this is what your role will look like because he's been there already. So he can help paint that picture. Like I can paint a big picture and I can help people know where we're going, but he can help them understand all the steps. So that's a big
Mm.
part of being able to go forward. And that's what he did when he was here. So the organization helping me to hire some people to go forward, I think that was a really important thing that Tom did for us too. He was integral in key hires that we had. And I think that that was really important for him to help me find a full-time integrator because he was very integrally involved in that. The interview process, we had somebody that we thought would be a good fit. We talked about it, we decided to go another way. All these things were really, I leaned on Tom pretty heavily for advice because he's been here and he's done it and I've never done it. So it was really great to have him as a resource.
Tell me more about that. I want to move in as we start to wind into toward the end of the story of this portion of the story.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's one chapter in a very long novel, but with looking for that long-term full-time integrator, what kind of triggered the realization that it was time we could, we're ready to start looking for that? What kind of triggered that? And obviously, Thomas, I'm sure you'll have and I want to hear Brian's perspective on all of this too, but Thomas and Scott, what kind of triggered that? How did you know what the right person needed to look like? When was the right time? Tell me about that.
Sure. Well, I mean, so Tom helped us understand what an integrator looks like and what that could bring to the organization. For me, what that would look like in that partnership so that that would free me up to do the things that I do naturally better for this organization, and knowing that there can be someone that can handle these other very important parts and it would be okay. Right. So that was really important for me conceptually and even emotionally to know that that's possible and that that can happen. I've never had that happen. Right. So I have to see it so that I know I'm okay with that and it will happen. You hear about it all the time, but I'm a love to see it kind of person. Right. So this was great to have a living, breathing example of it. That can't be downgraded in importance. I think that's really highly important in a fractional integrator. So then you start to see that, but then, I'm a visionary, right? So my mind immediately starts to jump forward to what's that going to look like if somebody's here all the time, and
I
just
want
not,
more.
yeah,
I want
right.
more.
So not on a fractional basis, this person is just here, living, breathing all the time, 100% plus, and so I immediately, not long after Tom got here and we sorted through a bunch of the mess and we were kind of being able to breathe a little bit, I immediately started to think, man, if it's this good on a fractional basis, what can it will be this on a full-time basis. So that's what got me there. And then really Tom helped build out, job descriptions, what we were looking for. And then even again, talking through resumes and stuff. No, this one's definitely not good enough. Tom knows me, man. I find it good in everybody. I would have hired the first person probably, but Tom was like, nope, no, 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 no.
Scott
I was
was
like,
not
what?
allowed to
Wait a
talk to
minute.
anybody. Scott was not allowed to talk to anybody until after I had vetted them.
Yeah, he
That's the
wouldn't let me
way.
talk to
That's the way we
anyone.
I
set
heard
it
about
up.
this.
So it was a great process. So he was a really great part. That was, again, super important part of the process to help us make good choices. And I really appreciate it.
Somebody who knows what a great integrator looks like
Exactly.
and who has gotten to know your business, your customers, and your team to
Yep.
know
Yep.
what kind of person they need that's going to
Yes.
be the right fit for that, but from an integrator's perspective of like,
Yeah.
and I'd love to hear from Brian. Like, when Thomas came in as the integrator initially and throughout the engagement and, maybe, even including if you could talk about the transition to either looking for or going to full time with somebody else. But what did you see, Brian? Like, what did you see how did that show up in the session room? Having Thomas in there as the integrator. What did you see, once that relationship began?
Yeah, I think what I noticed in the session room right away was a balance, right? I think Tom brought a balance to Scott. I think there was a bit of freedom in future sessions where Scott was allowed to be more Scott than having to feel like I've always felt like you guarded yourself knowing that some of the ideas or concepts or the quickness or urgency, right? Like, guys, we could fix this yesterday. Like if like why are we still talking about it? And you were guarded knowing that that was going to cause damage to the team as opposed to encouraging them. And so what I started seeing was, hey, now that somebody is actually going to take time and energy to invest in the team and lead and manage them well, I noticed you started freeing up to be more you, which is what we need, right? We need that in the room. And so it began this beautiful season of, I think, the team rising together, right, over that 1 year period, as we got really galvanized around the vision again and the possibility, right? Because I mean, the vision drastically changed,
Yeah.
right, with the demerger, and so
Yep.
like, what can we do? What do we want to do? What does that look like? And then it was like, all right, let's go. Here we go.
I would agree with that, Ben. It really that's super important. Like I said, I felt like I lost a part of myself, and I think that's what Brian's alluding to, is that I couldn't bring the natural parts of myself there because I knew I always had to fill this other slot in the organization that maybe isn't as natural for me, but I know it is. It's super important and it has to happen. And so I couldn't just be this part that normally I would just bring it. Instead I have to balance that. And I think that's what you're saying, Brian. And I
Yeah.
and I agree that's 100% true.
And it allows me to do a better job. There are certain teams where they're lacking an integrator, and I realize throughout the session, I'm filling in that integrator role during the day,
Hmm.
right? So I'm actually trying to help them, but the way I'm helping them is filling a role that they just desperately need. Well, the problem with that, we might have a great day together and everybody leaves all fired up and pumped up. And then they go back and now it's time, we say EOS is 1 day of planning and 89 days of execution. Well, you don't have that resource to help with the execution.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it gives me confidence knowing that the actual work we did together in the room is going to happen, right? We're going to leave there and we're actually going to follow through on the things that we committed to. And there's somebody who's solely focused and dedicated to the execution of what we came together as a team.
I
So
can see
it
that.
makes my job easier. It's more fun. It's more exciting to see that. I'd almost use the word parenting, right? The parenting in between the sessions. Sometimes I feel like I'm the grandparent. Give them a little noogie, teach them something, some words of wisdom, and then I send them on their way for 89 days. And you hope they come back and they actually did what they said.
Yeah. Fill them up with sugar and send them home.
Yep.
And I do that. If you've been to my session room,
I have.
a lot of
Yeah.
snacks.
There's
No,
lots
no,
of-
beef sticks. I
Beef-
ate all your jerky that one session.
That's right.
I had one visionary I worked with. He had so much nervous energy. He was on like ADHD meds, and he had so much nervous energy. And the EOS implementer would actually get like special pens for whenever we came over for him to like chew on. That like was okay. They didn't mind losing those pens. He would just
That's
he had
funny.
chew toys. This
Chew
visionary
toys.
basically.
Yeah,
Two
there you go.
choice.
But but anyway, yeah, the implementer, I had special chew pens for this visionary. But
That's awesome.
anyway, the uh, Thomas, what would you say as a closing word? And I want to get another closing word after this, but on the transition to the right long-term full-time integrator, what would you say about that? What did you see, or like what do you see as important about that?
I would just, the agreement and engagement and openness to everything that needed to be done to get to that point from Scott and his team. And it goes back to the culture thing that I keep harping on. Everybody was willing to do what it took to get to the stage where that was going to happen. And like he said, there was a little bit of apprehension at the beginning. What is this person coming in to separate us from Scott and change the way we do everything, and all the fears that pop up into people's heads, as opposed to now they're like, yeah, really. I mean, what would this look like if we had somebody with us all day, every day? Wouldn't I mean that just set everything off, right? And I think there's still a little bit of apprehension because they got used to me now. Now I'm kind of a part of the team, and of course I do that on purpose because I am, and I want to be. And but the team was ready. The team was ready, and to be quite honest, the most of our engagements are 12 to 15 months. Maybe sometimes a little bit longer, but 10 months is a little bit shorter for me. But it would have been even a little bit shorter if it hadn't been for the demerger. It took us, 2 to 3 months to kind of just wrap our arms around everything and not have our people or our clients suffer for it. And so it kind of set us back a little bit. And but immediately, the people and the company, they were really close already to being ready to start that search. But that demerger set us back a couple 3 months, and then of course the search took a few months. So the biggest part for me, it wasn't finding people that could do the job. It was to find the person that was going to be that partner, that VI duo, right? That with Scott, finding that person that had the business acumen and was going to match absolutely perfectly with Scott. That was actually the biggest challenge, was finding that person, the right person. The right seat was a little bit easier to find. We probably found a dozen very highly qualified candidates as far as the seat was concerned, but finding that person, that was the part that we really dug into. And I really pushed Scott and said, I want you to say, can you sit on a desk next to this guy all day, every day, and be happy that he's next to you? Yeah. And that was the question that I had for him. And of course, when we got to the final candidate, and it was beyond that. As a matter of fact, I think he might like him more than me. And that I'm a little bit petty, and but
nah, come on, Tom.
I'm very, but no, to be quite honest, I'm very, very happy about that.
Yeah.
I want to know that next year at this time, if we call Scott, he says, this is the best thing that's ever happened to our company. This is the best we've ever been. And that's what I want to hear at this time at the end of 2026. And I think he's got the best setup for it. I feel really, really good about what we've done with Walter Services, but where they're going. And like he said, you guys are getting ready to hit some really big home runs and stuff right after I leave. And sure enough, he's had a couple of really good things happen. And like, of course, it's always right after the chaos has been quelled. But that's where we live, right, Ben? I mean, that's generally the way it works. It's like the client that we had that hit their 3-year goals.
People don't call us because it's going well.
No, they don't call us when it's going. There's a reason why they call us. And we had the client that hit their 3-year goals at 2 years, and I had a 21-month contract with them. And sure enough, 3 months after I left, they hit their 3-year goals in 2 years, and I wasn't there for the big celebration, the big, announcement and everything. But we got to be a part of that. We got to be a part of that, and of course, the customer success, the client success is always, that's what we live for. So I was happy to be a part of it, and I'm really looking forward to Seth and Scott and this story next year. I'm really looking forward to that. The operations director that we hired there he's an absolute home run, and then I think that the integrator is also, and I'm so excited for Scott and his team. I'm anxiously awaiting the results.
And I want to get to a final word from Brian and Scott in particular. Some visionaries may be wondering, or like, this thing seems like such an unknown. Are we gonna, bring in somebody? Is it not going to work out? Someone's bringing in this right integrator. What, I guess what would you say to other business owners that are feeling hesitant or scared or unknown, about bringing in the next integrator or the right integrator, hopefully the right integrator, right? And so Brian and Scott, maybe a minute each.
Yeah.
What do you guys see? Go ahead. Yeah, Brian, go ahead.
I think there were actually two things that were mentioned. I'll just dive into them a little deeper. So the first one I would say is Tom didn't have specific experience in this industry. And I think there is a hesitation for a lot of visionaries of looking for this purple unicorn that farts rainbows. Like they're going to be not only my right-hand person, and they've got industry experience, and they're this perfect seat, and they've got all this stuff. And it's like, no, actually the the integrator can come in maybe without that industry background and be exactly what the business needs, right? I think there's a hesitancy there. And so I would just encourage people to think about that role of an integrator as being so team centric, so execution centric that it might open their options a little more. And then the other theme that was mentioned was seasons. I think visionary integrator duos go through seasons together. And I think Tom and Scott, while this was a short season, it was exactly the right pairing at the right time. And I think their new integrator is going to be the right pairing for the next season. And I don't know how long that season is going to last. That could be, 2-3 years. It could be a decade. I have no idea. But I do think there is I think visionaries are worried about finding this lifetime match partner, whatever. And it's like, no, like the business might need a certain type of integrator in the season it's in right now.
Right.
And so just be open to maybe what you need is a fractional integrator for that year or two in that season, and then you'll be in a different place, and your eyes will be open to the next season and the type of integrator you need to fill that role. Regardless, visionaries out there, please, for the love of God, you need an integrator. Just do us all a favor, do your team a favor.
There's the quote of the day, Ben. There it is.
Yeah, right. For the
Really,
love of God.
Really.
Get an integrator for the love of
Ben,
God.
okay, so I take exception to that because I'm a visionary, first of all. But of course, Brian is too, I think, Brian is too.
Oh,
So,
100%. And I have an integrator.
yeah.
I've run my
So
list.
I think my encouragement would be, why wouldn't you give it a chance? It is a short-term engagement. You're not going to lose much here, right? If you're thinking and you're looking at your business and seeing where you have this need, it's probably very obvious, like it was with me. And why wouldn't you do that? Like I said, I was going to do anything that wasn't illegal or immoral to make this business better. I think that most visionaries can see that, right? That why wouldn't I take a chance? They take chances on everything, right? Crazy chances. This is a pretty easy chance. And I think that I hired the same way as I wanted to hire a full-time integrator, though. I did go out and do my research. I did interviews, and I was very focused on, I wanted somebody that was going to be a cultural match for us because I thought that was my best. I was setting myself up for the most chances of success here. And so I felt like when I interviewed all kinds of people, Tom was my best culture match, as well as being definitely having the professional ability. So why wouldn't I take that chance? It's not even much to me. That wasn't even really a chance. It was like, wow, this is an easy investment opportunity.
Amazing. Scott Walters, Thomas Hoover, Brian White, thank you guys so much for making the time for this conversation. Truly, truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for the
Awesome.
time.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ben. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.